I've got too many bills.
If you need funds, you can apply in minutes at cashnetusa.com and have the money in your account as soon as the same business day.
Okay, got it. Applying now.
They've been helping hardworking people cover emergency expenses since 2004.
Hey, look, I got it.
You've got this.
When you need money fast, be the hero. All loans subject to lender approval. Speed of funding is subject to verifications and your bank's processing times. See cashnetusa.com for more details.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
You get this unconditional love from a baby, and it's really hard not to really need it. And you can see how, I'll be going through a bad day or something, and you want to put it all on them, and they're going to feel responsible then. And I didn't want that either. And so I had to really work on becoming self-sufficient emotionally so that I didn't just project onto them.
Hey guys, it's Rach. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. And I have a favor, which sounds kind of harsh if we just met, but I'm assuming that most of you have been a part of this community for a hot minute. And so I gotta ask, are you subscribed to the podcast? Subscribing to the podcast you listen to regularly is one of the best things that you can do for hosts like me. It helps to support the show and the staff that works on it. It ensures that you never miss an episode when we drop a new one. And here's the cool thing about subscribing. If you do it and then you hate this show, just unsubscribe. It's one click away. In the meantime, if you're listening, we would so appreciate it if you would just tap that button and make it official. Hey friends, I am so glad you're here. We have a fantastic new episode in our Mastermind series. So today we're going to talk about how to embrace change. And not just to embrace change, but to boldly embrace change. Joining me are 4 inspiring guests who have been on the show in years past, and they've all faced change head on and found incredible growth on the other side of it. So kicking us off, we have Tyler Ferguson, who shares his insights on navigating major career shifts and doing it with flexibility and courage. Then the legendary Shania Twain opens up about how she continuously reinvented herself. Rainn Wilson, actor and author, discusses his personal journey of spiritual evolution and redefining success through unexpected turns. Lastly, we're going to hear from actress and author Brooke Shields. She wraps up our conversation with honest reflections on resilience, empowerment, and the transformative effects of reinvention. If you've been standing at the crossroads, if you have been stuck in place for fear of moving ahead and you need a little nudge, this episode is exactly what you've been waiting for.
I grew up in the 70s and the 80s in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I just didn't really see a lot of representation of same-sex couples having kids. So for me, it just wasn't something that I even knew to aspire toward. And he grew up here in the Los Angeles area. He's, again, 10 years younger. He kind of came right out of college with a law degree and started working on the Proposition 8 case, which was the proposition that basically turned around marriage equality here in California. So he was immediately an activist and working in that space of trying to regain the rights of the LGBTQ community. So I think for him, it was always an aspirational thing that he saw himself getting married and having kids. So when I met him and that I saw that kind of hope and that desire, I realized I had that as well. I just didn't really have the courage to dream it for myself. when we got married, he did say something I really appreciated. He's like, let's wait 5 years and just be married before we even have this conversation.
Smart.
And I'm really happy we did that. Not to say that that's, you can't do it the other way and like just dive in. But for us, like, it was really great to have that sort of foundational time. And it got to the point of like 5 years, and I'm, only getting, well, we're all only getting older, but I really felt like I was only getting older. And so I sort of, put the fire under him a little bit. I was like, if we're going to do this, we should probably think about doing it sooner. And he was also seeing his parents get older and like realizing that it's all a ticking clock, we're not all going to be at the same age for forever. And he wanted to be able to do this at a time when he still feel like his parents could, fully enjoy that experience with us. So he put that into motion. And once we started, it all was pretty smooth, actually.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of pieces you have to get into place when you're doing this with the help of a doctor. It's not like you could just wake up and be like, oh, I thought I had the flu.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
My husband is a cancer survivor. He had cancer when he was 14, and his parents had the very wise decision. They made the very wise decision to have him go to a sperm bank before he went through chemotherapy.
So smart.
Just because they weren't sure if
For
he was
that
going to be
time,
sterile.
that's
Yeah,
smart,
but it's
too.
also a weird thing with he's a 14-year-old kid who's going through puberty, and like he's being taken to this fertility clinic and like having to like go into a room and do this thing, and then his parents are like taking him out for like a burger, and like it's just he was about to go into like chemotherapy for cancer, and it's like, so it was all this like weird stuff happening for him. But when we ended up testing his sperm later, when we were ready to start a family, he pretty much was unable to have kids.
Wow.
And so we used this banked sperm, and that's what Beckett, our first son, is.
Cool.
So we really wanted to, for us, it was important for us to at least try to sort of honor his parents' decision. And, then past that, we were open to other options. But yeah, I'm happy it worked out the way it did. It's interesting because Beckett was born during the pandemic. So I was meant to be working. I was meant to be doing a play on Broadway, and I was also writing a cookbook. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to juggle
all these things.
And then kind of everything shut down, and it was this blessing because then I got to sort of I was still working on the cookbook, but I got to, do this thing and just be a dad and, figure out what that means for me and like what my responsibilities are. And we were all just sort of doing it as a family unit together, and also probably drove us crazy because we had no escape. Yeah. But I think in hindsight, it was a really lovely thing, especially since I'd been so busy. I'd been doing Modern Family for 11 years and I had just ended. So I had this like built-in break. And then with Sullivan, our youngest, it was after the pandemic, and that play that I was supposed to do was back, and I was actually doing it in New York. And so all the things I was nervous about the first time happened with Sullivan. I was actually in New York doing the play when he was born, and I had to come back for the birth and then like go back and forth on my days off from New York to be around. And I was kind of MIA for the first 3 months, and Justin was taking the charge, and my in-laws were helping, and my family was coming in to help, but I was sort of popping in and out. It's like Papa was a Rolling Stone, and now it's like it was a totally different thing. So in ways, it was easier because I literally was not there. Yeah. But also, I think for both of us, just kind of having a test run, so to speak, like kind of helped it all. It was smoother. And now we're thinking about. It's those things like, is a job worth taking the whole family across the country? I'm in that place now. So I love doing theater, but it does take you away from your family. And it's also a schedule that's not made for parents, especially at this age, because, you basically have all day free. And then like, they're in school, and then when they're getting ready to go to bed, you're off to work. And then you're tired because you're staying up late, and your adrenaline's still running through your body at like 1 a.m. and falling asleep late, and then waking up early for the kid. It's torture. So it's not great. I could suffer through an early morning call if I had stayed up late the night before, and know that I could nap anytime I wanted to. But now knowing that like sleep is sort of like you have to fit into these certain windows, I would definitely do things differently now. When I was doing the play in New York City, I was very strict with myself. Like I would try and wake up and work out in the mornings because that's when I had the most energy. And I would do vitamin drips like once a week just to sort of keep myself healthy, so I didn't have to call out of the show. And I was also traveling back and forth and trying to just keep keep ahead of it.
Absolutely.
But I thrive off of routine. I find I wish I was more of a morning person because those early morning hours I feel like are so productive for me. I set my alarm hoping that I can do it, and then I end up sleeping until the very last minute. But while my husband's up and accomplishing 900 different things.
Right. He's like the Marines.
Totally. Yeah. He, I'll wake up and look at my phone. He's already sent like 9 emails to people that we need to send emails to. Like, I wish I could do it, but I just don't like to.
Yeah.
Sony, my producers and studio brought it to me. They had this idea, and I had pitched a different podcast that didn't end up going. And they said, we still want to work with you though. And here's a few ideas that we have, because I do work in the food space. I've hosted the Jane's Beard Awards a few times. Like I'm of that world. They thought it would be an interesting sort of marriage for me to be in a talk show situation at a restaurant. But like my career has always surprised me. I've been offered to do things that I feel like, why me? Like I was a host of the reboot of Extreme Makeover Home Edition that HGTV did. It was only 10 episodes, and but we got to like change 10 people's lives, and it was really exciting. But when it was offered to me, it's like, I know nothing about architecture or building. I've never been in an interviewer position. Like I don't. The last guy who did it was Ty.
Yeah.
What's his
Pennington?
last name? Ty Pennington.
Yeah.
It's Ty Pennington, and he he's so good at that. Like that's his world. And like, he's sort of synonymous with Extreme Makeover Home Edition. So I was like, why me?
Yeah.
But I trusted it and I just went with it. And I had a really profound experience doing it. So when the podcast thing came, I was like, okay, this sort of falls into that category of like things I never would have thought for myself, but I'm just going to try it. And I don't know if I'll like it until I do it.
Yeah.
And I've had a really great time doing it. A lot of the opportunities that have shaped my career are things that the universe has just sort of brought to me. I love that, and I that's also kind of why I always trust my instincts, because things have always sort of just kind of worked out. That's not to say there's months and sometimes years when I was younger where like nothing was really happening, and that was hard. But all of these big moments, even Modern Family, was something that just sort of fell in my lap, and like I just seemed to be in the right place at the right time. I never saw myself as a TV actor. I loved doing theater, and I was doing a show in New York that brought me to LA, and then like things started happening here, and then I've got to go back to do theater, and then won a Tony Award and like done things that achieved things that I only dreamed of. But it's been sort of like this weird flow of like different genres I've got to try. And Jack and I were just talking about Cocaine Bear, like that I got to be a part of, which is such a wild, crazy experience that I never thought I would be like part of a gross out horror film comedy. So I just trust these opportunities, and I certainly know when things don't feel right, and I go with my gut, but
yeah,
I've been lucky. Yeah.
Maine, where life, the way it should be, transforms all who encounter its spectacular landscapes. Rugged coastlines, pine-scented trails, sandy beaches, sparkling lakes, and tranquil forests inspire you to reflect and make meaningful moments. They offer endless opportunities for adventure and exploration. Whether pedaling or paddling, hiking or biking, Maine has more than enough outdoor spaces to make the most of long summer days. Relish in exquisite flavors harvested from the ocean and the rich soils of orchards and fields. Maine's makers are rooted in its heritage while boldly branching into new ways of thinking, doing, and being. Connect with its people in warm and authentic towns, which beckon you to stroll art galleries and locally owned shops, where generations of artists, writers, entrepreneurs, and craftspeople see the world anew. It's tempting to do it all when you visit, but take a beat and a breath. Get a feel for the time and tempo of Maine. Simple pleasures, scenic adventures, where every route is the scenic one. Discover more at visitmaine.com.
NetCredit is here to say yes, because you're more than a credit score. Apply in minutes and get a decision as soon as the same day. Loans offered by NetCredit or lending partner banks and serviced by NetCredit. Application subject to review and approval. Learn more at netcredit.com/partners. NetCredit. Credit to the people.
Some people aren't necessarily making the decision.
Yeah.
So there is definitely something deliberate about, in my situation, in my particular case, about making that decision and the timing of it. I had, for so many years, basically played a parental role with my siblings. So I wasn't in a rush to have my own kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm getting older. And I do have a window that I've got to respect if I plan on having a child at all. But the other thing in the mix was that I was 30 when I had my first hit.
Really?
So there was no way I was going to be able to start a family just as my career was taking off, my recording career was taking off. So it was a careful and, well thought out decision. But I did feel the pressure of time. And at the same time, it was not even a decision, but it was very clear to me that when I become a mother, that's my priority. Way over anything else, way over my career. Career is not ever going to be, my biggest focus once I'm a mom. And that was definitely the case. It ended up being that way. So I was just prepared to have to balance things.
Yeah.
And I did. My son was in the studio with me while I was recording the Up album. There's outtakes with him, cooing in the background, because I kept him in his little bed carriage.
Yeah.
While I was doing vocals. So of course I would leak into the microphone if he made a little sound or whatever. And I would time up from when he was sleeping. And I nursed till he was 14 months. So all of that album was me being a new mom. So it started soft. It was good. I was just in the studio. I was flexible. I could go in when I needed or when I wanted and keep him on a schedule. I started singing on stage from the age of 8 years old. So my career's been very long. My success just started late. I just didn't have the opportunities. I didn't have access to any of the record industry. I didn't have access to managers, even any venues that would have prepared me for success.
Yeah.
So by the time I had access to that, I was already probably 27. You don't want to be in any of those bars when the lights are on.
That's true.
Trust me.
That is very true.
So, no, it was always at night. And up until the age of 11, I was only allowed in the bar after midnight. You need a license to be able to be in there underage.
Yeah.
Which is very unusual. I may be the only kid that ever legally was able to sing in bars from the age of 11.
And then you have to wake up and go to school the next day?
Right. So my mom would get me up at midnight. I would go to the bar. I would do a set or two and then go back to bed and then wake up and go to school in the morning. Yeah.
Wow.
It was tough.
Did you enjoy it or how did that feel? Was it no?
I hated it.
Yeah.
No kid wants to get pulled out of bed at midnight and go sing. I was always singing with strangers because I was always a band that was already there booked. And then I would go in and do a set or two sets. In the beginning, if I'm being really honest, I had to learn to disconnect in order to be present. Like, how was I supposed to relate to these people that are drunk? They're all adults and I'm 8. So I had to disconnect and put on my big girl shoes.
Yeah.
And act like I understood what I was singing about. I mean, I'm singing about divorce. I'm singing about cheating and getting drunk and all of these things. I've never experienced. So I'm singing about all these things I don't even have any experience with. The challenge was making the crowd believe in what I was singing.
Wow.
Otherwise, they'd be like, get this kid off the stage, right? So my role was to be convincing. And in a way, as I matured and I grew into being able to sing about things that I'd experienced, mostly because I've written everything that I, record since the Woman in Me album. So I'm not interpreting anybody else's lyrics. I'm singing my own heart, right?
Yeah.
But there are days when I'm on the stage and maybe I've got the flu, or maybe I don't have the energy that I had the week before, or something. There is something about being able to maintain a frame of mind and get into the mind over matter mode.
Yeah.
And just do your best every time, no matter what else is going on. Wow. And I'd have to say that I learned a lot about that from being a kid in an adult world.
Yeah.
Because it's not about surviving. It's about overcoming. That is a very, very different thing. And then you can learn how to manage it. It's your power. You're not just surviving. You're not just managing, you actually can do it. You can be sick and get out there and do it. Yeah. So that's very important. I learned that very, very, very young. A lot of people don't learn that till they're much older. And I have to say that that's one of the benefits of learning this so young, even though it was really inappropriate.
Yeah.
A lot of it was an education nevertheless.
Yeah.
And it gave me I developed a lot of stage fright from it for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So there was a downside to it. It's like, oh my God, don't make me go up there and do this. There's this, oh no, I got to go up there and be someone else that I'm not. It took a long time to master even mastering is not the right, but I guess to find the real joy in it.
How old do you think you were when you started to feel joy in the process?
Only, I would say probably 10 years ago. Well, let me explain first that what overpowered the fear was my connection to the music. And then that connection I shared with you.
Yeah.
So we weren't ever disconnected over that barrier that I had.
Yeah.
Because the music, we were all there for the same reason. I loved the music that I made. I loved the music that I wrote. I respected it. I appreciated it. And so did the audience. And the other part of the barrier that got me through, that I overcame, even though I had that stage fright, was the fact that I learned to interact with the audience. I actually enjoyed that. I like the spontaneity. And that really broke the ice for me and really helped me. So I could shake off a lot of my fear by distracting myself and addressing somebody or just talking to somebody in the audience. And so I had ways, I had methods, but it was never ideal going on stage wanting to pee myself every time. You know what I'm saying? So, but I really only managed that 10 years ago. And there were just so many other things that could get in my way from never singing live again that I learned. It was just, if you can't enjoy this, if this is going to scare you, you got to stop it. But what scared me the most was that I would never sing again. So when you're faced with a bigger fear, now you're like, oh, wow, okay, that was actually not, like, what was I doing all those years, shitting myself?
Yes.
Getting up there when it could have been way, 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 way worse. Yeah. Like never being able to sing again. And that was where the voice issue really, I guess, gave me a whole different reality.
Will you tell that story for the audience if they're not familiar?
So at the end of the Up tour, I got Lyme's disease. I got bit by a tick. And I barely made it through that tour. I had some horrible performances and my voice was just becoming, less and less predictable.
Did you know you had Lyme's disease?
I did.
Okay.
But I didn't know that it was affecting my voice because the voice was gradual. So I knew that I got Lyme's disease. I treated it. I have lasting effects that will never go away now. But I didn't know that the nerves in my larynx were damaged. So my voice just got weaker and weaker. And specialists saw nothing wrong with my larynx or my vocal cords, which is what they check. When you're a singer, they check that. Everything looked great. The anatomy was perfect. So everybody started to say, well, it's probably just in your head. And I'm like,
God save us from people telling women that their medical problems are in their head.
And this could have been anyone,
Yeah.
man or a woman. But I thought, well, I just said, okay, well, whatever it is, I can't use my voice the way I need to. So 7 years of that kept me off the road.
Not singing.
I could only sing in the studio what it took was
Too much.
humiliating.
Yeah.
Humiliation. So I finally found a doctor that said, let's do a neurological test. I'm going to send you to my neurosurgeon and let him check other things that might affect the way your voice works, even though the direct physiology is intact. And on the list of reasons, then he found that my nerves were I had to have this terrible. I don't want to say that it's terrible. I would still recommend people get this test because it's necessary if you want to ever get to the bottom of a neurological problem that is, affecting your voice. So they put needles, really long ones, right into your larynx, right through.
Oh, I'm
And
stressed
they go
out
right.
for you.
I know.
Oh my god.
So right into the cavity of your.
Are you
behind the Adam's apple.
awake?
Yes, you have to be awake because you have to speak. You have to phonate.
Oh my god. Okay. All right.
Right?
This is a nightmare.
So this is where you've just got to be brave and bite it,
yeah.
and you got to do it. If you want to know what's going on, you got to do it.
Right.
Okay, so you push through that fear and you trust in the process. So I do that. I've got nerve damage on both nerves. There's only 2 nerves. Both nerves are damaged. He said, so now we got to determine why. It doesn't really matter why they were saying, because we can't undo it. It's not reversible. We cannot save these nerves. You will only ever be able to sing again if you can teach the anatomy around the weakness of the nerves to function and compensate. So I did that for a year and a half.
NetCredit is here to say yes, because you're more than a credit score. Apply in minutes and get a decision as soon as the same day. Loans offered by NetCredit or lending partner banks and serviced by NetCredit. Application subject to review and approval. Learn more at netcredit.com/partners. NetCredit. Credit to the people.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by PACE, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
We are extremely excited to be empty nesters.
Okay.
Just like, get out,
Get
kids.
the hell
Like,
out of
go-
here.
Go be free, baby
Right,
bird. Fly
right.
from the nest.
Right.
And but it's also terrifying. I think someone asked me the other day, like, what do you most fear? What is most like not in your control? And I would say, my fear for my teenage boy is and lack of control around the choices that he makes and mistakes that he's going to make. And letting that go is an entirely new sensation for me. And that is really terrifying.
Yeah.
You try and do everything for your kids, but at a certain point in time, they're going to be making a lot more of their choices. You hope that you've, nurtured them with a little bit of wisdom and insight and foresight. But, they're, especially the boys, like their brains are not wired till they're like 25,
Yeah.
physiologically. And, the whole COVID thing, in a lot of ways, today's kids, he's 18 and a half, he has the maturity of like a 27-year-old in a lot of ways. Like the way he sees the world, and his place in it and what's important. And he and in a lot of ways, he's 18 and a half going on 11.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of immaturity there, which happens with all teenagers, but especially during this COVID time,
Yeah.
because there's that socializing piece is missing during that year and a half. And that's when we really grow. That's really what school is about.
Yeah.
I mean, who remembers the paper that they wrote on the Scarlet Letter, right?
I have mine framed in the house.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Dr. Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, by any chance at NYU. He's got a bunch of books out. Some are on politics, he has a book on happiness. He kind of was one of the first people that wrote a positive psychology data-based book on happiness. That was like 15 years ago. He's got, and I can send you the information, he's compiling data, real hard data about the mental health epidemic with young people, which, as you know, is just off the charts. And one of the things he's arrived at is that helicopter parenting is really, really bad for kids.
Yeah.
And he talks about like the free range parenting, the woman that was like arrested for letting her 9-year-old like go to the park down the street.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah. And this whole idea of like over mollycoddling kids and taking away consequences, taking away skinned knees, letting them learn by failing, which, we've struggled with. Listen, I can talk a good game, but you want everything for your kids, but that's one of the indicators, because what it does is it takes away resilience. And, in the positive psychology movement, they've kind of really pinpointed at this kind of like astounding lack of resilience among young people that you'll see. Like they'll have a setback. Someone will say something mean about them online or something like that, and they won't come out of their bed for a week and be in tears.
Right.
And they won't be able to function.
Right.
I know, teenagers that I've, met or worked with or whatever, and they'll have a bad breakup and then they just won't do their homework for weeks.
Yeah.
When we were in high school,
right.
I mean, I'm a little older than you, but when we were in high school, like you had breakups and you did your homework.
Kept going. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just
absolutely.
had to keep on with your commitments and stuff.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it gets a lot more deep and more complex than that. But these are some of the indicators that they've been looking at. And he's got a couple of books coming out next year. And I'm actually going to be speaking with him in New York soon. And
cool.
His work is really phenomenal around this. Yeah. The Happiness Hypothesis. It's fantastic.
Okay.
It's filled with Buddhism and positive psychology findings kind of interwoven. Failure is so important for being a human being.
Yeah.
And, in my advanced age, Rachel, I have the benefit of, the hindsight and kind of looking at that. And I imagine a lot of listeners do too, of like, you can look through your life and go, wow, what key failures actually became transformative successes? And I know for me, like I got cast in this Broadway show when I was a struggling actor in New York, dirt broke, trying to get by, catering, waiting tables, driving a moving van. And I got cast in a Broadway play. And I knew it was coming up in like 5 months. And that created all this pressure because I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be really good because I'm going to get a New York Times review and I'm going to sign with the William Morris Agency and maybe I'll get nominated for a Tony Award. And I had all of this kind of stuff going on. I was all in my head. I had a terrible rehearsal process. I was really second guessing myself the whole time. I was very tense, very sweaty. And, sure enough, I did a terrible performance. I was bad. I was B-A-D. I was really bad. And people are like, oh, no, I'm sure you weren't that. No, I was really bad. If you had seen that play, you'd be like, that guy's not good.
Right.
It was hell. It was hell. There's nothing worse. Well, there are things that are worse. Cancer's worse. There's very little that's worse than knowing you suck in a Broadway play.
Yeah.
And you're doing 8 shows a week and you're on it for 6 months and you're showing up and you're bad and you're trying your best and you're trying to make it better, but you can't really at that point. And it goes on and on and on, show after show after show. My wife was going to graduate school at the time. I would sob to her in the middle of the night. And it was just horrible. And then it ended and I fired my useless agents. And I was just like, you know what? Screw that. I am never doing that again. I'm never going to try and please other people or do something in some way that I think people are looking for and put that kind of pressure on myself. I need to be me. I'm quirky. I'm weird. I need to bring who I am to my roles and not try and be some like ideal Tony nominated New York actor. And I get my clothes at thrift stores and I wear glasses and this is who I am. And I found my voice through a horrible failure, bad reviews. You're a young actor, you're just out of acting school and you get bad review in the New York Times. It sucks.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah.
And I really believe that I would never have gotten The Office had I not gone through that failure on Broadway. That enabled me to play kind of quirky, weird, alienated characters in a way that a few years later, 5 years later, 6 years later, I was able to, to land The Office thanks to one of my biggest failures of my life. I have a good friend who I know he's just been struggling for a long time. He's in the show business world and producer and director and whatnot. And I just knew he was just very unhappy for years. And he was just complaining and just seemed miserable. And he tried moving and that didn't really work. And he tried this and that. And he was just really struggling. And then finally, I called him and he's like, I'm going to need to, wait a while to call you back. And then I spoke to him and he said, like, I had a straight up nervous breakdown. I really hit bottom. And it was just like textbook nervous breakdown. I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of bed. I was in tears all the time. And now he's cleared the decks and he's just like, anything that is not important to me, I'm putting aside. He's focusing on his family, his recovery right now, like the one or two projects that he's really passionate about. And you could hear a kind of a clarity in his voice in a way, because he allowed himself to, maybe he didn't allow himself, maybe life did it for him.
Yeah.
But life picked him up and slammed him on the ground in such a way that I truly believe that had he just hovered in a state of chronic dissatisfaction, he never would have kind of found, his mission. And, this goes to kind of a spiritual concept that I'm really interested in, and I try and address in my book, which is suffering and why there is suffering. Why, from a spiritual perspective, is there suffering? Why did God not make a world in which we just all had nice lives? Yeah. Why do kids get cancer? Why do car accidents happen to teenagers? Why do really good people, bad things happen to them? And it's a tough conundrum, and I don't pretend to have the answers, but when you look at the Buddhist tradition and the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths and the kind of the essential teachings of the Buddha is, number one, like life is suffering. But then when you look at that word suffering in the Sanskrit, in the original translation, the word was dukkha, which means essentially, it's hard to describe, but there's so many variations of what the word means, but it essentially means dissatisfaction. It's like life is dissatisfaction. It's not really suffering as like, it's a wrestling with and being and things not working out and you being at odds with outcomes, right? And trying to control outcomes and whatnot. And that helps me so much, just kind of going to that teaching of like, life is suffering, life is dukkha, I wake up, Rachel, a lot with just a chronic dissatisfaction. Like, why am I not being offered that role? And why didn't this work out?
Do you really?
Yeah. And why didn't this person call me back? And how come this didn't work out the way I wanted it to? And gosh darn it, how come we're out of my favorite corn chips or whatever it is? But so I have to do a lot of work because I'm also a very anxious person. I suffer from an anxiety disorder and I've had a lot of issues with anxiety throughout my life. And that goes hand in hand with dukkha, with chronic dissatisfaction of I have to do work to rectify that dissatisfaction on a daily basis, which I'm so grateful for. Again, so we talk about how failure, how suffering can lead us down a good path. I'm so grateful for the fact that I have to get up in the morning and read some spiritual writing when I have my shit together, do a cold plunge, do some exercise to kind of be in my body, take just even a simple 15 minutes on meditation and prayer, and kind of realign. I have a gratitude text chain that I do with my friends and like these things that help me realign my day, because we go one day at a time, from a day of chronic dissatisfaction to a day of surrender, a day of peace, a day of like, in the Baha'i faith tradition, they call it radiant acquiescence. So living in a state of radiant acquiescence, which I struggle with, and it's not always, it's super difficult, but it's a daily battle. But I think the Buddha frames it so beautifully, but I think that goes along with what your father was also teaching.
Well, we've got one daughter who's going to be a senior in college, and our younger one is going to be a freshman. So I think that's the biggest change, is really looking at becoming empty nesters and like what that really means. And I don't think it's totally hit me yet. I think I'm going to be just destroyed. You watch them start their whole lives and watch them become who they are, and it's so foreign. It's just foreign. It's strange because the dynamic has been a certain way.
Yeah.
For 21 years or 18 years, for those 18 years, it's like that's what you're just used to that. And that kind of overnight change is pretty devastating.
Yeah.
And then you go visit them and you look at them in their lives and the way people talk to them, and they have inside jokes, and you're kind of going, well, wait a minute, I don't even know who that person is.
Right.
Like, I knew her first. I was here first. She knows me longer. You're sort of like, look at this. She's got a life. How did that happen? I didn't bargain for that.
Yeah.
I think it did more for her than it did for me because, you're still so bound to where they are, what they're doing, who their friends are, what's happening, what challenges are happening, how they're getting around. Like, you're still sort of not really micromanaging, but you're definitely a part of a lot of the bigger decisions. And so you're still tethered in a way, but I think the younger one I don't think she realized what it was going to be like. I think, you think you're going to enjoy being sort of an only child at home. And I think it just rocked her world a little bit. Yeah.
When she'll go away for next year?
Yep.
Is that okay?
And they're going to overlap for 1 year, which you kind of, it's ideal. It's going to be Parents' Weekend will be unbelievable to see both of them together.
Oh, they're going to the same school.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's at least that would actually make my heart feel better.
Yeah.
That they'll at least be together.
And they have, they have each other. And just an incoming freshman to have your sister be established.
Here's where we get coffee.
In a sorority. And she's visited. And so she's sort of been brought around, shown the ropes a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. University as a famous person. So it was, I thought it was going to be very different. But everybody was trying to be so respectful of me that they like really left me alone. And I didn't want to be left alone. I wanted friends.
Yeah.
So I was sort of like, kind of felt like a loser because I was just, all I did was study because I didn't have any social life. And I think people were just trying to give me space. And that was really odd. But also I didn't go to a school that had sorority Greek life. We didn't have it where I went to school. And so when I go now and visit my daughter and the world of Caio, and all of the things and the machinations of it, I sort of live vicariously because we just didn't have that. We had eating clubs where I went to school. And so it was...
You had eating clubs?
Yeah, they're called eating clubs. They're just houses that you eat all your meals in and do your studies and have parties and stuff like that. Because Princeton didn't recognize sororities. I don't know why or what the problem is. I never really delved into it, but didn't know why. But they definitely had these houses that you would then became your kind of like your center once you stopped eating at the cafeteria.
Yeah.
I think I always knew that I wanted an education because that was going to be a period of time that was really mine, that I couldn't work, I couldn't take off. I never missed school for work anyway, the way my mom sort of positioned it. So I grew up getting an education and not going to professional children's schools, not getting a diploma, a high school equivalency test and taking it and passing, or being homeschooled. And so education was always a source of personal freedom for me, just to be surrounded by regular kids who weren't in an industry that I was in. And so I think that when I just knew that I needed those 4 years to find out what I was and who I was and what I wanted and what I was motivated by, and really just to learn how to think. And that's what college did to me, is it just taught me that I had opinions, and I could talk about them, and in my industry where I was, nobody really ever asked what you thought of something. Nobody asked what your opinion was. They didn't want you to have an opinion. They just wanted you to make them money. Go do that thing and be a good girl. And so I think for me, it was such a period of freedom and fun and messing up. And I was safe. And, first time I got drunk and I didn't get in trouble. You know what I mean? It was all those kinds of things. Yeah. And then to be folded into friend groups and different friend groups. It was just sort of a revelation, to be honest, because it was such freedom. I feel like you just ache for different reasons. You're just now you can't, especially if they're a plane ride away, you can't just help with something or fix it, and that's what you've done for their whole lives, And then, so I just think I don't know if I'm going to have that feeling of, yippee, we've got the house to ourselves. Yeah. I think I'm just going to, I don't know. For me, it doesn't feel like freedom, and they come home and that but they're starting their lives. And I think that is, if you've done it right, they will flourish and find out who they are and what they want out of life. My mom, she was devastated when I left. When I went to college, and I was driving distance from my mom lived in New Jersey and I went to college in New Jersey. So it's not like it was hard. And I missed home so much that I didn't have I purposely didn't have Friday classes. I would leave on Thursday, go home on Thursday night or Friday morning, spend the weekend, come back Monday morning, go to class. And I made my mom come on Wednesdays to take me to dinner. I was so pathetically homesick. And I will say that I give her an extraordinary amount of credit for not letting me come home and saying, you will never forgive yourself if you quit. You're not a quitter. You've never been a quitter. Give it a chance. And it's kind of like the beginning of the end for her, actually, because without me, she had no point of reference. And then just started drinking heavily. And, there was the world as she knew it was ending. Yeah. And, she could have easily said, come on home. Come home. Yeah. Wow. You don't need an education. Come home. First of all, when you realize your children are not you, which is unbelievably shocked by that they're actually, a different person. And then the second is that they're different. They're completely different human beings. Yes. And you think, same mother, same father, same womb. Yep. Pretty much all the same DNA. How the hell is this human being not like that one? Right. And so, that was, everything that I've done with one does not pertain to the other.
Which is so rude, by the way.
I know. I mean, so unfair. Don't they know? Yeah, I found it much more natural with my first daughter to really be open-minded and say, oh, okay, that I just heard that. I'm not going to throw up or cry. I'm going to just listen. But because my relationship just has a different dynamic for each child, it didn't work that way. And I've had to really bite my tongue with my younger daughter because she'll tell me something and she doesn't tell me really a lot. She withholds a lot. And I'll start to try to just, broach a subject and she'll say, this discussion is not happening. We are not talking about this.
She knows how to hold her boundaries.
But come on, it's your mom. I'm your mom. She said, that's exactly why I'm not talking to you about it. And the other one is from what I know.
Yes.
Full disclosure. So it's just sort of, there was a bait and switch. I was like, that is not what I bargained for. I started a platform called Beginning is Now. And it was this idea that I finally felt like I was really just sort of coming into myself in a new, different way. And it felt great. I'm not as obsessed about fitness and body and comparing and all of those things that sort of just it got lifted. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't being marketed to in anything but words like dry and aging and, and crazy and all these things.
So true.
And I thought, my God, the women in my life that are in this era of they're badass and they're nuanced and they're diverse and they come to the table with unbelievable experience and knowledge and wisdom, and there's a vitality to them. Why is it that they're not allowed to be sexy? Why is it that, they're sort of discounted? And, I get it. We're not the hot girl at the bar, but we're also not in Depends. Like,
right.
We're not, you know what I mean? Like we have a lot to offer.
Yeah. And
we've already come this far, and there's more to do and more to go for if you want it. I think it's a really beautiful time. And the community just really grew. It just grew and it grew. Too many to number.
The Rachel Hollis podcast is produced by me, Rachel Hollis. It's edited by Andrew Weller and Jack Noble.
Imagine relying on a dozen different software programs to run your business, none of which are connected, and each one more expensive and more complicated than the last. It can be pretty stressful. Now imagine Odoo. Odoo has all the programs you'll ever need, and they're all connected on one platform. Doesn't Odoo sound amazing? Let Odoo harmonize your business with simple, efficient software that can handle everything for a fraction of the price. Sign up today at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
I've never felt like this before. It's like you just get me. I feel like my true self with you. Does that sound crazy? And it doesn't hurt that you're gorgeous. Okay, that's it. I'm taking you home with me. I mean, you can't find shoes this good just anywhere. Find a shoe for every you from brands you love, like Birkenstock, Nike, Adidas, and more at your DSW store or DSW.com.